Welcome to the History Story Podcast. Buckle up, history buffs, because tonight we're taking you on a wild ride.
A historic road trip, you might say.
Exactly. And trust me, this one is so strange, so full of twists and turns, it's going to leave you scratching your head and maybe even checking your reality settings.
We're talking doppelgangers, kings, assassins, and a whole lot of what-the-heck moments.
We're diving deep into the story of King Umberto of Italy and the day he met his double.
Our mission, should we choose to accept it,
Which we always do.
is to sift through the history books and uncovered sources, separate fact from folklore, and try to make sense of a story that feels straight out of a Twilight Zone episode.
So dim the lights, grab your favorite beverage, and get ready to explore one of history's most bizarre and unsettling tales.
Because this one, folks, is a real head-scratcher.
Picture this. You're the king of Italy. You decide to grab a bite to eat at a local restaurant. You walk in and boom, standing behind the counter is you.
Not just someone who vaguely resembles you, but your spitting image, an uncanny double.
That's what supposedly happened to King Umberto I on a hot July evening back in 1900. We're talking July 28th to be exact.
Setting the stage for what would become a tragically symmetrical tale.
It's almost like fate itself was setting up for a cosmic punchline.
A punchline that would play out in a shockingly literal way just a day later.
Now, before we get to the really mind-bending stuff, let's introduce the main players in this historical drama.
Front and center, we have King Umberto I, the reigning monarch of Italy.
Sometimes called El Re Buono, the good king, but his reign was also marked by periods of social unrest and, let's face it, some pretty harsh crackdowns.
Then there's the mysterious restaurateur, the king's identical double.
Also named Umberto. It's weird how often his last name gets left out of the story, almost adding to the whole mysterious vibe.
And, of course, we have the wild card in all of this fate, destiny, or maybe just an unbelievable string of coincidences.
And lurking in the shadows, we have Gaetano Bresci, the anarchist whose actions would bring this whole bizarre episode to a tragic end.
It's crucial to remember the historical backdrop here. Italy in 1900 wasn't exactly a peaceful paradise.
Yeah, it was a time of huge social and economic upheaval. Poverty was rampant, especially in the South. Industrialization was changing everything, creating new inequalities, and tensions were running high.
You had the rise of anarchist and socialist movements advocating for radical change, often clashing with the government.
And let's not forget events like the Bava Beccaris massacre in Milan just a couple of years earlier in 1898.
Where government troops fired on protesting workers, resulting in dozens, possibly even hundreds of deaths, depending on which history books and uncovered sources you consult.
It was a powder keg of a situation.
And this context is essential for understanding the motivations of Bresci, the assassin. He saw Umberto I as the embodiment of oppression.
But let's get back to that fateful meeting between the king and his doppelganger. So the story goes, the king was either having dinner or maybe just stopped in for a drink at this restaurant.
And he was absolutely floored by how much the owner looked like him.
I mean, who wouldn't be? It's like looking in a mirror, except it's not a mirror, it's another dude.
Naturally, the king struck up a conversation.
And that's when things went from strange to absolutely bonkers. They started comparing notes, and the similarities just kept piling up.
First, the obvious, identical looks.
Then, bam.
Oh, yeah.
Same first name Umberto. Okay, weird. But hey, it happens, right?
But then it gets truly freaky. Both men were born in Turin.
And hold on to your hats, folks, because this is where it gets really wild. On the exact same day, March 14th, 1844.
Now, what are the chances of that?
Talk about a cosmic coincidence.
But the similarities don't stop there. Both men were reportedly married on the same day, April 22nd, 1868.
Although it is worth mentioning that this detail is one of the harder ones to verify independently for the restaurateur.
The life of a king, meticulously documented. The life of a restaurateur, not so much.
But the story goes on. Both men also married a woman named Margherita.
For the king, of course, it was Queen Margherita of Savoy, the same one who inspired the Margherita pizza. Talk about a delicious coincidence.
And if that wasn't enough, both reportedly had a son named Vittorio.
Again, the details for the restaurateur are a bit fuzzy, but the symmetry is undeniable.
Here's another one that'll blow your mind. The restaurateur opened his eatery on the very same day King Umberto was coronated, January 9th, 1878. It's like their lives were running on parallel tracks.
Almost as if some unseen force was orchestrating these bizarre synchronicities.
Oh, and it gets even weirder. Both men had received decorations for bravery. The restaurateur supposedly even served in the same military campaign as the king, with the king as a colonel and the restaurateur as a corporal.
It really makes you wonder, if their paths might have crossed during that campaign. Two men living these mirrored lives, completely unaware of the other's existence.
King is I'm kind of creeped out by all these crazy coincidences.
You can imagine the range of emotions he must have been going through.
So intrigued, he invites his double to attend an athletic event with him the following day, July 29th.
Chance to perhaps delve deeper into this bizarre mirroring of their lives.
But here's where our story takes a dark and tragic turn. July 29th rolls around, and the king is at the event. But his doppelganger is nowhere to be found.
Instead, the king receives some chilling news. His double has died earlier that day.
In a shooting accident.
The exact circumstances are unclear. Some say it was a hunting accident, others a brawl, even a stray bullet. The details are murky, but the outcome is tragically clear.
The double is dead. The symmetry is shattered, but in the most unsettling way imaginable.
It's almost as if the death of the double casts a shadow, a premonition of what's to come.
Shaken but determined to fulfill his royal duties, the king continues with his appearance at the event. But later that evening, as he enters his carriage, tragedy strikes.
Gaetano Bresci, the anarchist we mentioned earlier, steps forward from the crowd and fires 4 shots.
King Umberto I is fatally wounded and dies shortly after.
2 deaths. 2 men with strangely mirrored lives, both cut short by violence within a 24-hour period.
It's enough to make anyone believe in fate, or curses, or maybe just the cruel randomness of the universe.
And while the assassination itself is a matter of historical record, the full extent of the coincidences surrounding the king and his double is, well, let's just say it's a matter of debate.
Exactly. Some historians believe that the story has been embellished over time, with details added or exaggerated to make the parallels even more dramatic.
You know, like the game of telephone where the story changes a little bit with each retelling.
Right. And that's where it gets tricky. It's difficult to find concrete evidence to independently verify all those amazing coincidences.
It's possible, even likely, that the king did meet someone who looked remarkably like him. But the sheer perfection of all those matching details, that's where the skepticism creeps in.
So how do we even begin to make sense of this mind-boggling story?
Well, there are a few different schools of thought. Some people chalk it up to simple cosmic coincidence.
The idea that in a world of billions of people, strange and improbable things are bound to happen sometimes.
It's just the law of averages.
Then there's the more psychologically intriguing theory, Jung's concept of synchronicity.
Meaningful coincidences. Events that appear connected but don't have a direct cause and effect relationship.
Like they're linked by something else, something we can't quite grasp.
Exactly. And the story of King Umberto and his double fits that bill perfectly.
2 seemingly unconnected lives suddenly intersecting and then ending in a tragically synchronized way.
It makes you wonder if there are forces at play beyond our understanding.
Then there's the good old-fashioned fate and destiny explanation.
The idea that some things are just preordained, written in the stars, so to speak.
And in many cultures, seeing your own doppelganger is considered a really bad omen, a harbinger of death.
So in this context, the restaurateur's death could be interpreted as a foreshadowing of the king's own demise.
Like a warning sign from the universe. But let's not forget the more down-to-earth explanation, exaggeration, and legend creep.
This is where Occam's razor comes, and the simplest explanation is usually the best.
So maybe the initial resemblance was strong, and maybe they shared a few key details. But as the story was passed down through history books and uncovered sources, those details got amplified, exaggerated, polished to create a more compelling narrative.
The core of the story, the meeting and the 2 deaths, might be true. But the sheer volume of perfectly aligned details, well, that's where the embellishment theory comes in.
And then, of course, you have the more modern, shall we say, fringe theories.
Glitches in the matrix, alternate realities, parallel universes colliding.
The internet loves a good conspiracy theory.
It's easy to see why those ideas take hold. The story is so bizarre, so seemingly impossible, it begs for some kind of extraordinary explanation.
So which theory do you buy? Is it pure chance, something more mystical, or just a good story that got better with time?
Well, that's the beauty of this story. There's no definitive answer. It remains an unsolved mystery.
Okay, now that we've explored the main theories, let's dive into some of the juicier details surrounding this whole saga.
Let's unpack some of those deep cuts that add another layer of intrigue to this already fascinating tale.
Starting with Gaetano Bresci, the assassin.
He was an Italian anarchist who had emigrated to the U.S., lived in Paterson, New Jersey, which was a hotbed of anarchist activity at the time.
He worked as a weaver, saved up his money, and then returned to Italy with the specific goal of assassinating King Umberto I.
He saw it as an act of revenge for the Bava Bekers massacre and other government crackdowns on the working class.
Talk about dedication to a cause.
And the weapon he used,
Yeah.
a fairly standard five-shot Harrington and Richardson revolver.
And what became of Bresci after the assassination?
He was quickly apprehended, tried, and sentenced to life in prison on the island of Santo Stefano.
A pretty harsh sentence.
Indeed. But his story takes another dark turn. Less than a year later, he was found dead in his cell.
Officially ruled a suicide by hanging.
However, there were, and still are, widespread suspicions that he was actually murdered by prison guards.
Given the political climate at the time, it's not hard to see why people might believe that. And what about the king's final moments? Are there any accounts of his last words?
Reports vary, but some say that after being shot, he murmured, "Ma questo è niente," which translates to, "But this is nothing."
A pretty stoic response, considering the circumstances.
It speaks to his character, perhaps, a king facing death with a sense of composure.
And what about Queen Margherita, the woman behind the famous pizza?
She was known for her strength and resilience. After the assassination, she remained a prominent figure in Italian society, though she largely withdrew from politics.
And yes, the Margherita pizza, with its patriotic red, white, and green toppings, was indeed named in her honor during a visit to Naples in 1889.
A fitting tribute to a queen who endured a great deal of tragedy.
Now, going back to the verification issue, you mentioned earlier that it's tough to find solid evidence to back up all those incredible coincidences between the king and the restaurateur.
Right. The story is widely told, but concrete proof is elusive. It's hard to track down reliable primary sources that definitively confirm the restaurateur's existence and all those matching details.
So while it's likely that the king did encounter a look-alike, the sheer perfection of the story might owe more to the power of storytelling than to strict historical accuracy.
And that's an important reminder that history is often a blend of fact and folklore.
Exactly. Sometimes a good story takes on a life of its own. And to add a bit more context, the assassination itself took place as the king was leaving an awards ceremony for an athletics society in Monza. Bresci was simply waiting in the crowd, biding his time.
A stark reminder that even in seemingly ordinary moments, history can take a sudden and dramatic turn.
And while the king is often referred to as the good king in the context of this story, it's important to remember that his reign was marked by its share of controversy.
Italy's involvement in the Triple Alliance, its colonial ambitions in Africa, the brutal suppression of internal dissent.
These events cast a different light on his legacy and help us understand the deeper political currents that led to his assassination.
The doppelganger story is captivating, but it shouldn't overshadow the complex historical realities of the time.
The story of King Umberto I and his double is a real doozy.
It's a tale that blurs the lines between history, folklore, and the Twilight Zone.
A bizarre blend of tragedy, coincidence, and perhaps even something a bit more supernatural.
Whether you see it as a cosmic prank, a statistical anomaly, or a cautionary tale about the power of storytelling.
It undeniably makes you think about the nature of fate, the role of chance in our lives, and the mysteries that lurk beneath the surface of even the most well-documented historical events.
And ultimately, that's what makes this story so compelling. It leaves us with more questions than answers and a lingering sense of wonder about the unseen forces that might be shaping our lives.
What do you make of all this? Was it pure chance, a message from the universe, or just a good yarn that's been spun and respun over time?
We encourage you to do your own research, dive into those history books and uncovered sources, and come to your own conclusions.
Thanks for joining us on this historic road trip through one of history's most mind-bending tales. We hope it's sparked your curiosity and given you something to ponder.
And be sure to join us next time for another deep dive into the strange, the unbelievable, and the downright fascinating stories that history has to offer.
Don't forget to share, rate, and follow the History Story podcast for more captivating tales from the world of flash culture. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those history books open.
You never know what bizarre and incredible stories you might uncover.